here live on the NYU campus, Archetypes After Dark, Washington Square Park, talking about crazy shit in modern day Agora with your host and hostess, Jesus Christ and
Karu Wang.
Woo! She even says it like an archetyptress. Wow! Today,
Say that's an American.
we didn't know what we were going to talk about today. And then we found out that the governor of Maine wanted to keep men in women's sports. And we were like, we are here in libtard capital USA at the moment.
Right.
God damn, I
Washington
wish
Park.
I had my MAGA hat just so I can incite a fucking riot. So we thought it would be a wonderful idea to have this conversation and put our lives at stake. Ah.
It might be a little dramatic, but.
Have you ever been choked for voting for Trump?
Well, I got called a maggot last
You
week.
did get called a MAGA.
MAGA. It's very smart, actually.
Yeah, it was really impressive. I was very, very impressed with the liberal community on
That's
these
right.
matters. And honestly, I'm a proud maggot at this point.
Can't believe it.
All right, but we don't have to talk about that now. All right, so I had men.
Well, you talked about how male-female is the biggest divide, or the biggest thing that we need to reconcile as a society, as an individual. Does that tie into what we're talking about today?
Well, what happens? The biggest gap in civilization, and this is technically true, is between men and women. Think about it. You could be a rich man or a poor man. You could be a rich woman or a poor woman. You could be a black person or a white person. In all of those dimensions, there's still a homogeneity. Male and female have the biggest lead. Like, there is a bigger gap between a man and a woman than there is between a rich man and a poor man. Right.
Being black and white.
Yeah, there's definitely black and white has to be third on that ladder because they're still humans, right? And we're still sociological creatures, so there's so much more in common. A rich man and a poor man, they still have reasonably identical characteristics across lines. They might not have the same access to sociological distribution of resources, but they have similar mentalities.
Right.
Men and women engender the masculine and feminine principles, which are biologically distinct from each other and spiritually distinct from each other. Now, every male has an inner female. Every female has an inner male. So gender within a person can exist on the spectrum, but a biological male is a biological male and a biological female is a biological female. So what's happened sociologically is we have grappled with this issue for so long, we've just decided to wash it out like it doesn't exist.
Right, as the woman who called me a maggot stated, she said, you don't think it's possible for a man to feel like she's a woman and a woman to feel like a man? How can you be so insensitive?
Right. Of course, I know there's days that I feel like a woman. You should see me dance. It gets wild. Right. I know I've definitely stood in front of the mirror with my man boobs way too much. But
TMI.
no, it's just enough information
Okay,
for
right.
our audience.
Okay, sure.
Now, that doesn't mean, this was a joke I was doing when I was on comedy. I said, I had chicks with dicks sitting on my lap before they got you street credit in the city, right? And I definitely have no problem calling you by the pronoun that you want me to because I love being loving and respectful. But if you think a man could get pregnant, you lost your fucking mind. And back in my day, if you cut your dick off and killed yourself, we just called you crazy, not the pronoun that you're choosing. So when there's spectrums of tolerance on these lines, right? Of course, if somebody wants to cross-dress, of course, if somebody wants to...
But there's reality that we need to contend with.
Right, so the general idea is that if someone wants to cross-dress, they can cross-dress. If somebody wants to ask me to call them by a pronoun and consider them when we want to talk to them, I'm more than happy to do that. There's a line of tolerance. If you want a man to enter sports and beat the shit out of women to prove that you're tolerant, you've went far down the spectrum, not of gender, but of insanity. And at that point, there's a reaction. And this gets into things I talk about all the time. If you're calling me racist in the modern day, you're more responsible for Donald Trump being elected president than I am. If you are saying that men belong in women's sports, you are more responsible for Donald Trump being president than any maggot on the planet. And I think that we have to understand that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. we don't tolerate domestic violence. But all a person has to do is say, I identify as a woman.
We don't accept piercings and tattoos if you're under 18. And now you can have mastectomies and life-altering operations.
Because when has Pfizer ever gotten anything wrong? Right? I mean, when has medical science ever overstepped its bounds?
Never.
Right? I know there's definitely times where a little boy can feel like a little girl, especially before puberty. And that's why what goes on in the medical communities is really a catastrophe, and it's an unseen catastrophe. Because when you start giving puberty blockers, that child has never actually had access to the testosterone that would make them cognize themselves as a male. I found this out recently. Boys in puberty produce 20 times the testosterone as a woman in puberty.
Right.
So if you're giving a puberty blocker, they never had the chance to make the decision.
Right.
And
no, I know somebody who was transitioning, and they, as a woman transitioning to a male, and then they were given hormones, and they're like, holy crap, this is what it's like to feel like a man. Like, I've never been so horny in my entire life, which was eye-opening as a woman to hear.
No, and it's an amazing thing too, because I don't even know if they have that much testosterone. I had a friend of mine that she had like 3 times the testosterone plant, and she was like, all I could do is stay home and masturbate all day long. And it's like, that's 3 times. Like, men have 20 times the testosterone.
Crazy.
Right. So, and this is kind of what I say to guys all the time. Guys will be like, yo, women are crazy. I'm like, again, if you're a woman, you'd be crazy too, and if you don't like it, fuck dudes. And it's like, and if a girl has a problem that a guy wants to fuck, it's like, yeah, but like, then fuck a girl, because that's what it means to be a guy. It's like,
right.
So, but the thing is, when does the line get crossed? Any rational person could say, I want to respect you the way that you want to be respected. And of course, there's people in the far right wing that would have a problem with any semblance of gender spectrum identity, and that's a bit much, right? The idea that you could pray the gay away, yeah, but the opposite would also be true. You could also pray the gay in then, if that's true. I have happened to be very good friends with the author of Everyone's Gay When They're Masturbating. Shout out, Red. I want to get the book. I should have had the book out to plug it. It's a fantastic piece of literature. Now, there's space along those lines for honest conversation, and we do need to be tolerant to
and
people.
I think the integration of your opposite sex correlate is a divine path that we should encourage, but how do we encourage it in a healthy way? And I love what you said before to me, where you said, I don't think in our society we have a rich enough understanding what it is to be a male, what it is to be a female, right? And to actually attempt to live like a woman or whatever your opposite sex is, actually, yeah, sure, that does help you in a certain extent to understand the opposite sex. But do we really have the medical or the science to fully transition? Like, no, not even close.
No, this is what, I mean, I think it was Brett Weinstein. Somebody said, we are gods, but for the wisdom, right? So there's a real problem when you start throwing medical science into situations where medical science doesn't belong. And what's happening culturally now is men run around and they want to fuck everything with a pulse until they find a woman they like, and then they get sold on monogamy. And women don't want to be abused and just looked at as only bodies, so then they cling and find somebody to be monogamous with, because it's a good way to know that the guy actually really likes you.
Right.
And then that was instantiated by religion. So what we have is an overly possessive feminine psyche and a very adolescent masculine psyche. And neither side is actually developed.
The thing that really blew my mind when you said it, maybe years ago, was you said when a woman would, like, as a kid, right? A girl just wants to find the one. They're Prince Charming, the guy on the horse, right? And when it comes to a man, when they're, adolescents, at their adolescence, they want to fuck as many women as possible. And the integration of the opposite sex correlate is when the man finds the one who they're willing to sacrifice all other women for, and for a woman, it's the guy that I'm willing to, like, fuck, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, it seems to be the case, too, that when you look deeper, that a woman sacrifices her purity, right? So a woman loves to be pure. So when she fucks a guy, she sacrificed her purity.
Is that true? I mean, when you have OnlyFans nowadays,
that's at the heart of the feminine. At the heart of the feminine
right.
archetype is
just
purity.
Playing devil's advocate. I know.
No,
what you mean,
but this is if we hold Jungian psychology as an empirical science, and we hold the idea of the virgin mother, right? as being part of the quaternity of the Godhead. And we could argue that these things are actually scientifically verifiable, archetypically speaking. Purity is at the height of the archetype of the feminine.
And this is the thing that where I actually really empathize with a lot of liberal women about is it sometimes feels like the archetype is tied to somebody else. Like being a mother is you're tied with being the child or husband, right? It's almost where as the masculine archetype is more individualistic. Does that make sense? And then even when you look at the church and Jesus is the individual who sacrifices himself for the collective. The woman is the church. It's the community, right? So I'm grappling with that. Like, how do I embody the archetype when it is dependent on, like, I'm probably not, I don't have a child. I have Dylan, who, he's pretty much my husband. So for me to manifest my archetype, does that mean it's contingent on those things?
The only thing that anybody has to do to manifest their archetype is walk as purely and honestly as possible. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, what happens is the feminine archetype is probably going to be less nuanced than the masculine archetype because it's just pure. It's the pure dimension. And the feminine's less hierarchical. When you look at the masculine archetype, it's going to be more complex because what happens when the male becomes refined, right? The women are kind of born refined. Like, the joke that I tell about this all the time is sex is so important. God made one gender that only cares about that and another gender that cares about everything else. So the feminine is born with all of these things inside of it. And then there does seem to be a transition from maiden to mother to matriarch, right? And that happens naturally over the course of life. When you start getting into women in culture and positions of power, of course women could take positions of power and nobody has any problem with that whatsoever. But when you're climbing the social ladder, that's masculine because the feminine represents the horizontal axis and the masculine is the vertical axis. So for the man to transmute all that sexual energy into actual coherent thoughts, how do I take all of this sexual desire and turn it into something that's worth sharing with people? Jordan Peterson talks about that all the time when he says, don't worry about how to attract a partner, how to worry about how to become the best partner, then the partner will show up. So when you take that 20 times testosterone, which testosterone has two functions, fuck it or kill it, right? So now if you take the kill it dimension of that and transmute it into how do we destroy the obstacles that are in our way of being the best person available. That's the proper use of testosterone. Mm-hmm. But it takes a lifetime of work to learn how to do those things. Your manifestation of the archetype is going to be different because it's how do you just walk towards purity. If you're starting to walk up a social ladder, it has a more masculine component. If in your life you hold a feminine thing because you're very of service, right? And a lot of times what we see is the man uses his archetype to be in service of the female, and then the female uses her archetype to be in service of the male, and they join together. This is why it's perfectly reasonable to say that there are gender spectrums within people, and some people could be more masculine, some people could be more feminine, some people could feel that way. That doesn't mean that you get to play the same fucking sports. Right. And it's an example of when extremism gets out of control and dangerous because people are trying to prove themselves to be compassionate. Like the woman screaming at you, like, how can you be so insensitive? As if this is a monumental leap in consciousness, as if you've never contemplated that before in your life, and as if we're not living in a very, very, very challenging world.
Yeah, it blew her away when I said, yeah, I have trans friends. We have an abundance of compassion and love towards the trans community. And by the way, I have friends who are MAGA, who are Trump supporters, who are also identify as trans. So what do you say about that? And she actually wanted to talk to me more. But then we were at a spa. We were at a Korean spa, and I was like, I'm not Korean, but I look pretty Korean. And it's like to be called a maggot in a Asian setting as an Asian. I was like, wow. And I'm explaining to her the concept of a weaponization of compassion, and her just constantly, how can you not be compassionate enough? And then eventually when I got to the point where I'm like, actually, I was just like you. I was I was very liberal. I used to work for Al Sharpton. Trust me, I get it. And eventually she calmed down when I said, and she goes, why did you vote for these people who voted for Trump have to be held responsible? I said, the party moved. I didn't move. The party has.
Well, and what I think happens is people that don't take enough spiritual responsibility for their own lives then want people who voted for Trump to be held responsible. Because I know the second Trump got elected, I said, you have to have a different relationship to a candidate than you do to a president. And now let's see what's going on. And then I started to refine my thinking more and say, basically, what the fuck just happened with Trump as a figure? And I realized Trump is a symbol of the apocalypse. He is a symbol of a changing world, of a world.
Like, yeah, you would always say that he was bound to happen. Like the Trump, not Trump himself, but the figure, the archetype of Trump was inevitable.
Right. So now what happens is and it's a guarantee, we are a reality TV show country that is controlled by billionaires.
Yeah.
There's no way, how do we not take responsibility for the fact that it got to this point? And this is important. Basically what happens is people that don't take enough responsible for their own development then project it onto politics.
Right.
And it's very difficult because if you see the archetype of the Trump voter, they're normally very spiritual people. And the more spiritual a person becomes, the more responsibility they begin to take for their own lives and for the suffering of the world. The more materialistic a person's thinking are, the more they'll project shit onto politics. Now, if you're living in a coherent world, the liberal mentality could work because you want the wealthy to take care of the poor. We're not living in a coherent world. So there's going to be a constant tug of war between left and right about which side's going to be right. I wish it was as simple to say left is always right or right is always right. It's not. And what I see hysterically is these dimensions of screaming that Trump is a racist Nazi and Elon Musk is a Nazi. I say, how is that not a radical left-wing conspiracy theory?
Right.
Now, I understand that sometimes conspiracy theories are true. Yeah. I've believed in a lot of conspiracy theories that got proven true. But that's a fucking radical left-wing conspiracy theory. So then what we have to do is start assessing what causes conspiratorial thinking. And what causes conspiratorial thinking, I think, is always when you're not taking enough responsibility for yourself and you want to project something onto an oppressor. So you have negative religious thinking and conspiratorial thinking that kind of function as a dialectic, right? So Marxism is kind of a negative religious thinking. Conspiratorial thinking is the other side of that. What we're seeing from the left right now is this collapse into conspiratorial thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that that's perfectly acceptable because it's still a marginalized fragment of civilization. And the poles are balancing out, but it's something that we have to go through as a civilization. I want to really get back to, though, the consequences of not allowing yourself to take the fullness of responsibility for everything that's occurring in your life. So I think about my friends.
Uh-huh.
They're still smoking cigarettes and taking Xanax and telling me I'm a dangerous person because I voted for Trump. And I think to myself, that's funny because nobody would ever look at you and call you dangerous. Because you sit in your fucking house all day and you don't interact with anybody and you drug yourself into oblivion. Right? And what is it for a person to start contemplating another person as dangerous? They have to have some force behind them. They have to be able to affect the world.
This actually goes back to masculinity being under attack.
Right. The second, and then I've said this repeatedly. It's like, I never wanted. I always I grew up in Jersey, and people were really fond of Trump where I lived. When I was 4 years old, somebody told me I should grow up to be like Donald Trump. He was always in the news. My parents were big fans of him when everybody was a fan of him, right? He always had kind of a cool name in New York. No one ever thought he'd be president, right? Then The Apprentice came out, and I remember one day I was watching The Apprentice, and this guy was bragging about how he evicts 90-year-old women so he can get the money out of them. And Trump said, well, then I'm going to have to evict you because you have to have a heart in this business, too.
Wow, he said that?
Yeah. And it's funny because that was like one of 3 things I remembered from that show. And then when I was talking to a friend of mine that hated him, she was like, and it's funny the things that you remember.
Yeah.
Because I remembered seeing him say that. So I always had, and I would watch him talk to people, and there'd be times where he would be manically vicious. And then there were times that he was incredibly soft, and he'd look at people like, you are like the nicest guy in the world. I can't see why anybody would ever have a problem with you. I just want to help you right now.
Right.
And then you realize there's this split in him where Trump clearly cognizes himself as your best friend or your worst enemy, how you're going to go down those lines. I think that I always struggle with that part of him because I don't like to think of myself like that. I like to think of myself as I want to be here to support you and I'll deal with it if you lose your mind. And then when he rose to prominence the way he did, I said, is there something wrong with the way that I'm thinking? And it sent me into a mode of self-reflection about how do you deal with the contentiousness of the world we live in, and is the way that he deals with it right? Or is it just that because of the times we're living in, he is the reflection of the psyche that we need to see may manifest?
Well, I really struggled during the mandates about, I actually ended up working in a restaurant for a little while because I felt so bad about going into restaurants without the Vax card. And because I knew it wasn't the people that worked there, they were just following orders, which is obviously problematic in and of itself. But then to have to be going in there and totally causing chaos and disrupting them, and it was, there was a period where I felt really bad for doing that, but then it was, the circumstance was like, you had to do it.
I think what happens is that when the line gets crossed, and you take a lot of shit until the line gets crossed. Now maybe Trump's line is quicker, maybe at that level it has to be, maybe when you're, and then I imagine when you're a billionaire and everybody wants your money and you're tied up in these deals all the time with sharks, you're just always in that mind frame.
Yeah, my mom's in real estate. That's why actually I met Trump when I was a kid because of my mom. She was invited to his house every year, and seeing the emotional turmoil like that my mom went through as a real estate broker, it's a really tough business. And I actually saw him make a speech in the Bronx, and I remember for me the thing that really stood out was he said being president is actually not that hard in comparison to real estate. And I really believe that, because you really need to have balls of steel.
No, it's funny too. Joe Rogan talking about how every president looks like they age 90 years, then there's Trump and he's just sitting there like there's no problems whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I didn't want, I really struggled. Why was I struggling to vote for him? I didn't even understand. Was it that I didn't want to answer to the collective, that I didn't want to have to defend the position, or did I have genuine concerns? Was it that I was just having the collective psyche rise in me, so the turbulence that was going on in the collective relative to this guy was something that I was experiencing and I was expressing itself as my trouble with the vote?
Right.
And it became a funny trajectory because I think we all knew the woke shit went so far that it doesn't matter what the fuck happens, we needed him to win, because we needed to say enough is enough with this bullshit. And then when you have these people that haven't fucking learned, and they still want the men to beat the shit out of women to prove that they're compassionate,
right, and then be called a maggot.
And the question is, how do we get the planet to move towards the center?
Yeah.
How do we get people to realize that extremes, maybe in your personal life, maybe one night you can go out and get really drunk and the next day you crash, maybe, but ideological extremes like that are bound to lead towards chaos, and they're actually the same thing. This is the really funny thing. Again, it's the far left and the far right that always had the problems with the vaccines. Right? It's the far left and the far right that have always engaged in conspiracy theories. And the woman that called you a maggot will not acknowledge that she is the same exact thing as somebody on the far right. I mean, I'll
give her the credit that she did say it was a slip of the tongue. I apologize.
But that is the funniest thing in the world to me, because she actually thinks that that's a problem, right? She's like, oh my God, I shouldn't be speaking like that. It's like, no, like, here's the thing. There are people in the world that suck. And if you unconditionally love them, you have to love them as sucking, or you're never going to be able to do anything. So what you see is a bastardized feminine energy, where it's just compassion at all expenses.
But this is the hilarious part of this. This spa was in New Jersey, very blue state. You know, a lot of people from New York go to this spa, and then we're sitting there. She's starting the conversation with us. We were minding our own business. She comes and jumps into our conversation, And then I'm like, we're in a spot. We shouldn't be talking about politics here, right? She keeps bringing up Trump, and then eventually these two independents walk in, and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. And the independents, and they actually believe fully in what happened January 6th and all this stuff. So it was the independents that actually shut her down and said, you have to calm down. And then I started talking about BLM and how I worked for Al Sharp in 2013. I met the founder. I knew the founders of BLM. I found them. We all found them to be radicals. I found it despicable that people that were saying that they were protecting the black community were actually using the skin color to make more money, right? And then a black woman comes in and she's just like she heard all of what I said. No problem. She was wearing a mask too. No problem. She's just like, who saw the situation, saying, hey, we're in a spa, guys. And I'm like, I absolutely agree. We should not be talking politics right now.
No, but I think that's really
And
funny.
that happened in a blue state.
No, the thing that I think is really, really funny about this is that it's really funny. The polls are saying that that Trump's satisfaction rate is down, and I'm like, are those the same polls that said that Trump was going to lose the election?
And that Hillary was going to win?
And Trump said the most brilliant thing ever. He said, I knew I was winning. Look at my rallies, look at our rallies. Fuck these polls.
Yeah.
And then it's like you're in a blue state and the left-wing lunatic is just getting fucking mobbed. So, but I want to talk about that though, because it's a really funny thing that you deal with these people. I know a lot of times, say, we'll use the term asshole, right? And then you'll call someone an asshole. And say, oh, you should never talk like that. It's like, is the problem that I called him an asshole?
That he really is
or
an
that
asshole.
he is an asshole,
Yeah.
right? If you're one with everything, you're one with Jesus and you're one with Hitler. And if you want to unconditionally love everything, you have to unconditionally love Hitler. But if you don't accept that Hitler is a sociopath, then you don't unconditionally love him as Hitler. Mm-hmm. So, and when you can't do that, you can't see the distinctions between somebody like Trump and Hitler.
Did you see Young talk about Hitler as an archetype?
No.
He's the hero, Messiah archetype for the Germans. He was saying.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was really interesting.
No, and that's I imagine that's why there's so much of this projected onto him, because there are people on the right that look at Trump as a messianic figure.
Yeah.
And he does have a tinge of that art. He has a very strong piece of that archetype,
Sure.
actually. Like he is manifesting that archetype. And that's why if you're against him, you would project that type of Hitler thing onto him. And I do think that it's
even though the definition of being a Nazi, being Hitler, is hatred towards the Jews, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, so these are the things that I wish people would check themselves on, right? Because when you're making those allegations, you have to realize the structure of the society that you're living in. It's a Judeo-Christian society. So when Hitler was coming after the Jews, the reason he's coming after the Jews is because they are the underpinning of the fabric of the world. It's not that he's mad at the fucking religion. It's that religion was the basis for all thought in the world. So he's attacking the thought matrix of the planet. When Trump is coming in saying we have to stabilize the thought matrix, it's the opposite of that. So the reason, again, this had nothing to do in its initial point with a racist ideology, or when he's talking about the superior man and creating those things, that's an afterthought. He has to take out the Jews specifically, because those are the people that hold the fabric of civilization together. Whether you like, I'm not making a religious statement. The Torah is the root document of Western civilization. The Bible is the root document. This is what this society formed out of. And that's why it became a murderous regime, because he's attempting to destroy the entire civilization by attacking its ideological foundation. Trump is attempting to save the civilization. And then what's happening is the people that want to destroy the American ideology
Just calling him Hitler.
are projecting that he's Hitler.
Yeah. Well, now they're also doing that with Elon, because he raised his hand and made it look like kind of, people are assuming that it's a Heil Hitler.
It's adorable. It's really adorable. I mean,
do you want to get into this about him being the Antichrist or not?
I mean, Elon Musk, it's weird. I don't know him, right? When I see him talk, I like him. Elon talks to you. He doesn't talk at you. A lot of other billionaires, when you hear these people
Zuckerberg,
talk,
yeah.
all of them.
It's like plugging something.
They're talking at you when they talk. You don't feel like you're talking to the person. When you're talking when Elon Musk is sitting there, you feel like there's just a person sitting there. You feel like if this guy came and sat down with me in Washington Square Park, I could just play a fucking game of chess with him. That's a big distinction in when seeing if someone's relatable or not. Now, a lot of times people say like, oh, that doesn't determine whether someone should be president or in charge of the government. That's true. But when people are relatable along those lines, it normally is a decent indicator of if they're evil or not, because they're not hiding too much and they're not pushing an agenda.
One of my favorite moments is when he quoted Princess Bride. He takes the longest pause ever and he goes, "Give me money, give me power." He's like, "I don't care. I just, I forgot what the freaking quote is, but it was just one of my favorite Elon Musk moments. When he quoted Princess Bride. You know what I'm talking about?
No, not at all.
I don't care. Like he's gonna pretty much do the right thing no matter what. Like money does not phase him.
Listen, when I see him, okay, that's my gut on him. Where I start to question myself is I understand that society is made of poles, and what real thinking is poles balancing themselves within you. That when you're actually thinking, what you're doing is you're taking the forces of the collective psyche and of the forces that root the collective psyche, the anima, the animus, the things that emerge from the primal tree of life.
Oh, and also his son got sacrificed by
those things. It's strange because if you're actually trying to put everything together, all of that could just get washed away conspiratorially, and you can say, oh, that's all a setup, you're doing all those things. When the way that I contemplate thinking again, it's that you have primal forces that come from the unified Godhead, that polarize themselves, that then move into sociological constructs, that then balance within people. So the thoughts aren't just these little scattered things that go through their head. A real thought is when you are acting as a vector of balancing the forces of eternity within you. I'm aware that at this point in time, the left-hand path and the right-hand path, the left force and the right force, are at war, and if you're tending towards one particular side, you're going to resonate with what that side is saying.
It's walking that line, the yin and yang, where the black and white touch. You talk about the needle, the camel. You explain it much better.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that when we're balancing those forces, I'm aware that I could have a proclivity towards tilting to the right now at the level of internal intuition. And I really struggle if I should just go that way and commit to it, or I should sit here and really try to figure it out. But then I realized something. I don't think Elon Musk really gives a fuck if I think he's the Antichrist, and I don't think it hurts anything if I grapple with these questions really hard.
Sure.
So, what's up there? Then I think to myself, if I grapple with this hard enough and I come to a genuine answer on this, it could help the civilization. So I don't feel like I'm betraying a movement because I'm not attached to a movement. I feel like we have an obligation to be genuine and really be trying hard now, because we are all one with the whole thing. We all do have a tremendous amount of influence, and that's why the left will call me dangerous, because I can move a civilization. You can't. And where I look at Elon Musk, the thing that scares me is Neuralink. And having a very charismatic leader like that crosses party lines, so now that infiltrates the resistance, is a genius thing for the Antichrist to do. And part of the prophecy of the Antichrist is that the Antichrist will cure multiple diseases, which is what Neuralink's promising to do. And the level of genius that he's occupying in cross-paradigmatic landscapes is Luciferian. That doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that that is the dimension that the rectified Lucifer would have, right?
It's sort of a wait-and-see scenario.
So when I'm looking at him, I naturally believe that he's genuinely trying his hardest. He's done so many things, but I do think he's lying about extraterrestrials, which bothers me, because the way that this cosmic drama does seem to unfold is that there's been serious extraterrestrial involvement in our planetary development.
Yeah, you could kind of see the struggle between Rogan, and Elon Musk when they were talking about it.
And it's a problem because you don't know. I mean, I know my best friend is a shaman, and he says he's really not a fan of Musk. He says his mother was a Satanist, and he says that basically he's just a CIA plant that and that he's basically pushing all negative extraterrestrial technologies on the planet, and he's just the front man by which they do it. And that makes some sense to me, but then I also think to myself, is it possible that he was unconscious of that growing up, was put into these systems, and then there was a part of him that was just pure, and then his son got sacrificed and he just snapped, and he decided that he was going towards the light. And these are the things that we have to really wait to decide. And I saw him on one of the late night shows, and say it was Jimmy Kimmel, somebody like that, and the late night host said to him, "Are you the Antichrist?" Elon Musk said, "I hope not." Which is an incredibly fucking honest answer.
That's a great answer.
Honestly, if I was in his position and somebody asked me that, that's what I would say, right?
Yeah.
So, because
he has infiltrated government, he has infiltrated the automobile industry.
But there's something that's very important though with everybody that's freaking out when they're screaming "get billionaires out of government." It's like Doge is a temporary position. Doge is a temporary government department. So I think maybe the reason the left thinks it's going to be permanent is because we were supposed to go through 2 weeks to stop the spread, and it turned into 2 years. So they think that 2 years is going to turn into 20 years.
Term limits.
This is supposed to be a short situation to clean out the camp.
But then the irony is, like, you have people like Pelosi that, this is why the right advocates for term limits.
But I want to believe that he's good.
Yeah.
I want to believe that he's fighting on the right side of history. And I think you're right. I think that we have to see, but I mean, it's hard too, because even Neuralink, which bothers the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
I understand his arguments for it. Now,
and I also hear the arguments of, like, if we actually have a way to increase our IQ or our intelligence, we would be able to communicate with one another better. That's another argument that I see.
And then there's a deeper level to this that's really important too. That's, look, it's the fucking age of Aquarius. Technology gets integrated into this. This is the way that we're going.
And when I went to China I went to China for the first time when I was a kid, and it was like so backward, people on bicycles. And then I came back, I forgot, I was maybe in high school or something. And the way China is moving, it is moving faster than the people can catch up with. And so I see that happening in China. The things that I saw in China right before the pandemic also prepared me for what was to come now. I see the wave.
Do you think that the way that we stop the wave, like towards communism? Yeah.
I mean, sure, of course, but then I think right now it's not about communism. I'm not worried about communism as much as AI. It's the human.
The major thing is, what I think was happening is that the deep state wanted to get the world into a total socialist regime before AI was dropped.
They're going to try again, but I think a lot of people are awake.
I came up with a new saying today. I was like, I'm a socialist, not a socialist. Right. And if we stop that ideological push and kept the notion of the individual, then technology can serve us and we won't end up slaves to it. So these are the questions that I bump into with Elon, because I want to believe that it's real. I do think that it's happening. And there's this piece of me that's like, it would be too good to be true if the technological revolution is under the control of somebody that's on the side of humanity. And he does argue that he's on the side of humanity all the time. He says, I'm pro-human. And he's actually said that the real debate is not between left and right, it's between pro-human and anti-human. Right? And, this is why I say that we should talk about this. It's a thoroughly genuine conversation. It's not scripted at all. We're just trying to figure this out in real time right now. Is that Micah? No. We're just trying to figure this out in real time right now.
Yeah. No, like
being that he has said, like, I'm pro-human, it's funny because if people blatantly lie, they eventually fall, right? And if he's sitting there and he's saying these things, if he's saying, I don't care if I go bankrupt, if he's saying, give me money, give me power, I don't care, I'll do the right thing, right? The thing is,
Let
if
me
he's
flip-
lying,
Uh-huh.
if he's lying, he will self-destruct.
Let
But-
me flip the question on you. Do you think we've stopped communism? Do you think that?
Yeah, I do, and the thing is,
Let him measure the meat.
my
Let him measure the side for you.
what's up?
Can he measure that table?
I'm doing a podcast right now,
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, sorry.
so
Sorry.
I love you. So, what? I think we're in the process of it. And I think it's a constant.
I think we're gonna win that one.
I think that what happened was, I think that's the symbol of Trump with the fight, fight, fight raised in the air.
Yeah.
That I think enough of us, what the election was about, no matter what happens with policy, no matter what happens over the next 4 years, was a referendum in the collective that says this far left bullshit, like we will take Trump before we let this happen. And then there were those people that really, really liked Trump. And like I said, I don't know him personally. If you asked me what I thought, I think he conceptualizes himself as the extreme of friend or enemy. And I think if you ask me, I think he genuinely has a vision of saving America.
And the world.
Yeah, and that's what. Well, I think it's saving the world through saving America is what his vision is.
But like what he's doing in the Middle East, what he's doing with Ukraine and Russia. I mean, he's running on those platforms.
These are the parts of him that I think are just a genuinely good person. He's like, can we stop killing people?
Yeah.
Then there's parts of him that do get fucking extremist. I think that he is a bit much on certain things.
I mean, it's funny.
But you realize there's also something else that's true, and this is a deep principle in the core of reality. You could stop any behavioral pattern that's developed, but you have to do it with absolutistic force. Right? So what's happening is because he has come at this time
When the
as
men
a
have been
symbol.
so emasculated.
Right. And there's an absolutistic force on the left that was pulling us.
Yeah.
Trump emerged as the absolutistic force that resurrected itself. And I wouldn't do the extremist shit that he does. But then the question that emerges is, I do think it was necessary, even if I wouldn't have done it. But that's why I wasn't running for president.
And that's why we ended up sitting on the floor of the freaking restaurants
Right.
over here saying we're not leaving.
We're not leaving without eating.
Without eating.
We're not leaving without eating. A bowl of rice and beans.
A bowl of rice and beans.
Like, is it too much to ask? Is it too much to ask? Aren't healthy people happy people? So
Oh man.
I think that, I mean, on these questions, no, I don't think that they line up with those negative archetypes. I really, really don't.
And all I know is what we're seeing right now is unprecedented. So the level of transparency, the podcasting, the what we saw with Trump and Zelensky.
This is something that I think is really a great. Terrence McKenna said this, and I think it's really great when you talk about conspiracy theories. It's like, of course there are rogue groups of powerful. I'm paraphrasing what he said.
Right.
Of course there are rogue groups of powerful people that have agendas that want to take over the earth.
Yeah.
But good fucking luck. The beast is way too strong to encapsulate.
Yeah.
So what you'll see is they have to consistently try so hard and do so much crazy shit. And they have influence and they have power. But there's just too much. And there's too many rogue elements. And as long as people, when you asked, do you think that we're winning the war against communism? My internal response inside myself is, as long as I'm here, there's not going to be communism. I say this all the time. It's like, I'm never going to see a communist revolution because I'm either going to stop it or I'm going to be fucking dead. So I'm not really that worried about it.
Right.
There's a place where, as long as enough of people feel like that, but I forgot the Princess Diary thing with Musk. I mean, and then when we're talking about some of the things he said, it's an amazing thing because you could normally tell people by what they say. This is why the world had a problem with Kamala and Biden and Clinton, because they weren't saying anything. They never said anything. Now, you could take that to an extreme with a Hitler-like figure who had a very clear mission of things he was saying. But when he said those things, what he was saying was to strike at the core of the destruction of civilization. What this is saying is at the heart of trying to save civilization. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad that we talked about this because I was struggling with it, but the more I talk about it, the more I realize there's certain things that are happening spiritually inside these movements that really kind of almost guarantee that we're doing fine. Because if Musk is lying about some of the Braveheart shit that he's saying, he'll self-destruct. And
And right now, the fact that we just see Trump winning, like time after, it's just, it is. I tell people, I'm like, it is a wonderful time to be a Trump supporter.
I mean, it is the problem.
But then but then we still have to wait and see.
Well, no, there's multiple. I don't feel that way because I above all else feel that he's a symbol of the apocalypse. And
Right.
when I think about the presidency, it's about what does that collective symbol mean, and how is that symbol going to pull civilization. So what I don't enjoy, anybody in any position of authority right now is going to have a really hard time.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
like having to defend. I actually don't engage in defending what's going on in the world. I just normally say, like, it's the apocalypse, buckle up. Right? And whether it was Trump or it was someone else, the civilization was heading for the apocalypse. Now, I hope that the better angels are right on this one. I hope that my intuitions on this one were right. I have no way of knowing, but what I'm not looking to do is defend a fucking political figure.
No, yeah.
What I want to be doing is finding how we could ourselves align with the archetype that serves as a magnet that pulls the rest of culture back to fucking sanity. And that's, you know, it's really funny because I always think it's easier socially to be on the side that lost the election. Right? Because no one's mad at you then.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I haven't worn the MAGA hat in New York since the election.
That's not true.
Oh, it's not true? Oh, okay.
Totally not true.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought I hadn't. I thought I
No?
I
Was
don't-
it only in Jersey? Hoboken being
No,
Jersey?
I was wearing it. I was wearing it in the park. I was wearing it here, which was really, I was catching a lot of shit. It was actually scary to wear it here. Like, and then I was like, fuck it, I'll wear it here. But it was actually very scary to wear it here. And then after the election, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I mean, you couldn't get fucking stabbed. I mean, it's really,
Yeah, I also got, this was after Trump won, I put on the hat, and some guy tried to like push me into the garbage, and he tripped and ended up falling into the garbage himself, so.
Yeah, which is really symbolically perfect.
Which is also crazy because, like, again, a man physically assaulting me over a hat.
He identified as a woman.
All right, should we end it there?
I think we should end it there. We love you. This is Archetypes After Dark. Totally balanced psychologically, and signing off.
Love
Over
ya.
and out. Love you.
Bye.